Start the recording, Chair.
Thank you very much, Gareth. So as it is 11 o'clock, we will start the meeting. So good morning, everybody. Lovely to see you. So first of all, Gareth, can we have apologies for absence, please?
Yes, Chair. I've had apologies from Councillors Griffiths and James in Neathwood Talbot, and Sarah Perron, Andrew Dully and Louise Miskell.
Okay, thank you very much. And next item, are there any disclosures of personal or prejudicial interests, please? No? None? Lovely, thank you very much. The next item, to approve the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 11th of June. So first of all, can I just go through them for accuracy? Page 1. Okay, page 2. Page 3. No, thank you. So minutes overall. Do you approve the minutes overall, please? Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next item, Kim, report of the County Archivist. So over to you, yes, please.
I'll just go through some matters arising from the previous minutes, Chair, if that's okay.
Yes.
So I think it might be easier to put them in at this point rather than to include them in our report. Okay. The first thing that I observed from the matters, it's matters arising from the minutes. So it's paragraph 4 in the thing. So it's from the previous meeting to the last meeting. Staff structure. I should just explain very quickly about the changes to the staff structure in the archive. So I've been working on the issue of the paraprofessional staff within the archives, and when I last had a complete revision of the staff structure, which does go back quite some time, it's when County Hall became Civic Centre, so part of the Civic Centre projects, which goes back to 2007. We had very narrowly defined paraprofessional duties. So we had, somebody who is responsible for the Family History Centre, somebody who's responsible for getting documents out, and so on. The departure of the resignation of the Family History Centre supervisor in order to take up employment elsewhere gave the chance to have a look at the staff structure. And so I've come up with a generic archives assistant post, which hopefully we'll be able to, that will be the posts that will go forward in the staff structure in future. So basically the paraprofessional staff, who are really the people who keep the public service running, means that they have their multitask duties. So that's going forward. And this staffing report is currently in the process of going through the many approvals that it has to have, and hopefully in the coming month or so we'll have that agreed. Rather than move everybody into this new role, I think we're just naturally, through natural changeover in staff, that the future role going forward will be that you have generic staff who are capable of doing all the duties. So I don't intend to upset the apple cart by forcing people into jobs that they didn't necessarily interview for some time back.
Okay. Thank you, Kim. So hopefully by the next meeting, you have some good news with regards to that post being approved.
Yeah, it has to be said, we're very, very short-staffed at the moment. We're lucky. I mean, we couldn't run the service without a temporary increase in hours for an existing member of staff, and it's fortunate we've still got this very restricted service. And of course, looking forward, what we're aiming to do is to increase our hours and also open in Neath again, so going back towards normality. But shouldn't do too much under matters arising. Also in paragraph 4, the plaque to Jessie Donaldson, which I stress isn't part of the archive service entirely, but I did do a lot of work for that, and you'll see if you've seen the Archives annual report, there's an article by Jen Wilson on Jesse Donaldson. So I'm pleased to report that the plaque was unveiled on June 19th. As I say, it wasn't an Archive Service thing, but I'm involved in that process. Really pleased that it got so much publicity as well.
Yes.
So, no, it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. And the article was very interesting, because we saw that in the annual report at the last meeting, but it was very interesting. Thank you.
So those were the two matters arising. Sorry, Councillor Rees, I'll give way to you.
Just on point 5, Kim, about the facility at the Mechanics Institute in Neath. Is there any update on that?
I was going to go on to that in the next thing. Yeah, okay. So it's always difficult with matters arising, but so I will cover that. Yes. So I'll move to my report. Actually, I'm not going to move to my report just now. I just wanted to talk about some things looking forward. So it's slightly unorthodox, but I think one of the problems of a quarterly report is that you're always looking retrospectively, and what happens is that you don't actually see what's right in front of you on the horizon, because we're looking back over the last quarter. So I think it's not usual for me to say, but I think the committee should actually put this report into the context of what's just about to happen. So the issue that I want to raise is the accreditation of the Archive Service, because we are facing imminently a review of the accredited position of the Archive Service. So the panel's in early November, but I have to produce the report in October, so it's a matter of weeks away, and that sets the context for the whole of my report. So I just wanted to say a little bit about accreditation, and because then you'll understand the context of the last quarter. So Archive Service accreditation is a recognition, it's a standard of good governance and proper collections care, and also consultation and involvement with the public. And it's a standard which is recognised across the UK, and it's given to the to archive services which meet that standard. Probably about 2/3 of services, I would say, across the UK already have this standard, and the West Glamorgan Archive Services had the standard since 2016, but when we reached our halfway review back in 2019, we were moved to provisional status. And I just want to go through some of the reasons why we are on provisional status. And this means that we have to be reviewed annually to see whether we still accord with the standard. You can see immediately, I'm sure, why it's important to mention this, because this sets the context for everything that we're doing, because the maintenance of the accreditation standard is key to key to a number of things about the Archive Service, but one is the ability to apply for external funding. So if you wanted to apply to HLF, for example, or something like that. But another key thing is our status as a local place of deposit for public records. By public records, what I mean is the records of UK central government, which are deposited locally by the National Archives, and primarily those consist of magistrate courts records, magistrates court records, but also a number of other national bodies. There's currently some discussion with TNA about the deposit of I'm going to get the name wrong, MCA, I think it's Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. I hope I've got the name right. Their records locally, and obviously that's with a maritime county, that's a significant potential deposit for the Archive Service. So maintaining our status as a local place of deposit for public records is also key to the existence of the archive service. So as I say, we've had 2 years of provisional status as an accredited service. We're coming up for our review because on provisional we have to be reviewed every year, and then accreditation itself only lasts for 6 years. So halfway point we went to provisional, we've had 2 years of provisional, we've got 1 more year, and then we have to make a full application again in 2022. So 6 years from 2016. Because we're on provisional status, we're sort of on an alert level with the National Archives, and I've got in front of me a letter which was January 2020, because it was just before the onset of the pandemic and everything was upset by the apple cart. But the National Archives notes our provisional status, and that this says it may have implications for the status of the archives, and we would welcome an early opportunity to visit the archive service and discuss these matters. Of course, this was January, and then March the lockdown started, and so none of that has gone forward. But that's the context for the report, because if we look at the issues that the accreditation review panel have concern about and why we moved to provisional status, I mean, the primary thing is the panel noted that the Swansea Council intends to dispose of Swansea Civic Centre, and requires the service to provide a plan for the future sustainability of the archive service going forward, and says this remains a critical area for the future sustainability of the service and its collections, and that is key to why we have provisional status on accreditation. There are a number of other things. One relates to our work with digital records, because as we're aware that the world is moving from a paper world to a digital world, and we will in the future be required to archive, store digital records just as much as paper records, and that's obviously been changing over the years, and some future plan for that. And the service has been working across with other Welsh local authorities and the universities in Wales to try to produce something sustainable there. There are also issues around conservation. As you're aware, that we don't have a conservation unit. We outsource our conservation. It goes to Gwynedd Archives and Glamorgan Archives, and there are concerns that we don't have a conservator on site, so we're not regularly inspected. And as members will be aware from previous reports, we've recently subscribed to the National Conservation Service, about which more later when we talk about future building plans. So I think we have improved in that respect, in that we're getting professional advice from from a conservator on future plans for conservation. So there's one thing ourselves identifying items that need to be conserved, but it's also we need a proper coherent plan for our conservation work. And there are the minor points that we need to constantly review in terms of public consultation, disaster planning. I think that's it, actually. So that's the context in which I'm going to be presenting my report, because that comes up for review in the next few weeks. So there is a possible, a possible risk that we might cease to be accredited. I just don't want to sound too downbeat, but it does set the context for the discussion that we have going forward, in particular in relation to the potential relocation of the archives to other premises. Personally, I see the maintenance of accreditation. It's not only a status thing; it's also important sign of good governance, and I'm sure that members would agree with that. That you know, whatever the external circumstances that are affecting the archive service, it has to be continued to be well run, and most importantly, we have to make sure that the collections receive the level of care that we would expect. The professional standards that, by employing professional archivists and having proper inspection by conservators as well, that you would expect that the collections would still receive that level of care. So that's the context for what's going to be in my report. I think you can probably see the connections if you read the report already.
Absolutely.
So,
well, Kim, thank you for setting out that context. I'm sure the committee appreciate you going through those very important and very key aspects of our accreditation. And I think we can all see, as you said, how it links to the matters in the report. So I think that was a very valuable thing for you to set that scene out for us all. Thank you, Kim.
So obviously this relates to paragraph 2 in the report, but I'll just go through in turn, as we normally do, through the report. So paragraph 1 relates to the public service, which I'm pleased to say the Family History Centre reopened on the 27th of July. It's not been used very much, but I think the important thing is that we are actually open. And one of the things I've tried to stress with the staff, and hopefully that is now the case, that we need to look as though we're open normally and welcoming. I think that the confidence of many people to visit facilities has been knocked back hugely, and particularly since we do have, predominantly an older user base, which I probably class myself nowadays. So I think that whenever we've looked at our the statistics that we have about our user base, I think it's fair to say that we tend to be used by an older age range, and I think that unfortunately is the generation that is probably a little less confident about coming out, especially if they have to be in close proximity with strangers. And I think that really has knocked us back in terms of the use of the Family History Centre, and also getting to Councillor Rees's point. I think that's also relevant to Neath as well, and it affects both the potential users of the facility and also the volunteers from the Neath Antiquarian Society who are prepared to help run the service. We are maintaining social distancing in the Swansea service point. We've only got 4 spaces in the Family History Centre, 4 spaces in the search room. I haven't done a serious amount of work yet on Neath, but my feeling is that it could be done, but you would have very, very little public space for the for use of the Mechanics Institute. I think that piece of work has to be done now, because we are, third wave. We don't know about the third wave, but I think we are moving out of the lockdown and the restriction on public venues, and it certainly is a piece of work that needs to be done. And I would propose that hopefully by the end of next quarter, we will be able to report more positively on this. But it's a matter of both the public being willing to come, but also in Neath, it's the volunteers being willing to help run the service. So I have been in touch with Mrs. Watkins about this, and we need to start discussions on this, but it is going to be based on the willingness of the volunteers to help run the service, as well as how the area could run operating social distancing, and also cleaning routine as well, of course, because we have a rigorous cleaning routine in Swansea. All keyboards are wiped down after use, all tables are cleaned, and so on. So we do, it's always very risky to say it's a COVID secure service, but we operate according to a risk assessment, and we undertake rigorous cleaning, etc., etc. I think that covers paragraph 1, so I'll take any comments or questions that members may wish to raise, or indeed about the accreditation as well.
Any questions or observations so far? Perhaps the accreditation may well come up during the course of the discussion, Kim, around the new premises. But anything regarding the service in section 1? No. It's good to see, though, Kim, that people are returning, and just comparing the figures to last quarter. Obviously, the visits are up, and that reflects in also, I think, the documents being issued as well. Perhaps if people are coming to the centre, then there's an increase in people putting in requests. So good to see it, some return.
Yes. Yes.
And much better than what it has been. So it's a good start, isn't it? Yeah. And as people gain their confidence, I'm sure they will start to patronise the centre even more. So. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think actually every one of those 153 people has their own individual story. I mean, I don't do a lot of search room duty, but I have to say that the small amount of search room duty that I've done, it's been very satisfying to see how helpful we've been, how much help we've been able to provide to individuals. Perhaps just flag up one customer who I dealt with. Swansea Valley farmer who has an issue around the ownership of his land and where exactly the boundaries of his farm lie, because it borders Neath Talbot owned land. Been very able through getting out the range of documents for him to help assist in showing how the land has changed, and I have to say Neath Talbot Council have also been very helpful. I've been able to use my links into Neath Talbot Council with contacting officers over in the council. So these kinds of issues, we say just 153 people, but actually they've been students undertaking research, they've been people with boundary issues, they've been people wanting to check the electoral register to see whether they're registered, because of course the electoral registration process has been undertaken. So there's a whole load of things. So I think although we're not used very much, it's really important that we're open and we're available, and which is I also say to the staff, we may not have anybody booked in, but somebody may turn up on spec. Please make sure that you're welcoming and that the place is neat and tidy, and you're not going to be caught off guard if somebody just comes through the door. And they may come in to buy a book or something like that. So that's also a possibility.
Yeah, but no, I think that really illustrates how critical the service is. That it is about people being able to access the records that are there, which only exist in the archives, because for many it's life. It affects their lives and their livelihoods as well. So I think that's a very good illustration. So thank you for that, Kim.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll move on to the issues around paragraph 2. I think I want to hedge this round as well. Actually, I'm putting sort of context around context and so on. But as members will be very aware, this paragraph 2 relates to a project which is much larger than the archives, and it relates to the purposing of the former British Home Stores to create a city centre hub in Swansea, which is I think a really good project, and it's obviously a very, very good location for that purpose. The issue that is relevant to this committee is whether it is also suitable as for archive storage. I want to perhaps partition the storage question from the question of the public service, because I think it's in the way that I think it's a very good location for example, a central library, or obviously that's nothing to do with me, but for accessing council services, you know, it's a prime location, probably won't ever come up again for quite some time in the city centre. The issue that concerns me and that concerns this committee is whether you can also put in an archive store there. Now, we've had several discussions in previous meetings, and I'm sure I don't need to reiterate that harking back to the accreditation matter, it has to meet the British Standard 16893 for the conservation of heritage collections, and this is the nub of what has been ongoing in the last quarter, about whether you can have this multi-use building, which, as I say, I think is admirable location, an admirable plan for it as a city centre hub, whether it's also suitable for the archives, and specifically it's about archival storage. You know, it's fairly unusual for an archive to be in a multi-use building nowadays in terms of new build. Most archive buildings have been built purpose for that thing, and it's also in particular it's very unusual for a multi-use as such as the purpose of this building is intended to be. It's not unusual for an archive to be combined with a library or a museum, for example, because there's a lot of crossover there. But what's planned for the city centre hub is, you know, many third sector agencies going in there, and it's for access to council services, and you know, some really good ideas going in there about regeneration of the city centre. But our concern should be simply whether there is sufficient assurance that transferring the archives to that building will be safe and sustainable for the future. Now, I'm not an expert in this matter, so this is why I subscribe to the National Conservation Service, because the acknowledged UK expert on archive buildings happens to be a co-director of the National Conservation Service, and I think we've had so much value out of that subscription, I have to say, that because I couldn't manage on my own in terms of the requirement that, you know, the question of whether this is going to meet British standard or not. I perhaps should go through the British standard just to, not at great length because it's about 70 pages long, so but and it is actually in the report, but the British standard requires the organisation proposing to you either convert or build the building from scratch to carry out a series of risk assessments, in particular looking at fire, security and environmental controls. I think every member of this committee, everybody present in this meeting certainly has been round the current archive strong rooms in the civic centre and seen, some of the measures that we've specific to that storage area. And it has to be said that the civic centre archives were built in the 1980s. I think I'm getting right, around about 1982. So they do reflect the standards as were in the 1980s. So we're 40 years on from there. So the standards have tightened, and in particular, for example, there's much more emphasis on sustainability, environmental impact, and so on. Now, the British standard requires the council, the Swansea Council, to carry out these risk assessments, and in particular, the very first risk assessment relates to the whole location of the building. That is flood risk, structural integrity of the building, and the overall suitability of the premises. This is a piece of work that needs to be done, and then we have agreed a process, because what's happening is that the city centre hub project is moving alongside and moving very rapidly, and at the same time the piece of work that is required for BS 16893 still waits to be done. So it has been agreed that no decision has been made on whether the archives go into the building or not. My head of service, Tracy McNulty, has made this clear right from the very start, that if it's not suitable for the archives, they don't go in. My slight concern is that the speed of the project means that some of the work that needs to be done in order to see whether the archives are suitable for going into that building has not been done. So we've got two timelines, as it were. You've got a very fast timeline that we need to get the city centre hub open, but we also have a whole series of work, and we need to make a decision on whether it's good for the archives or not. I can see an awful lot of hands raised, so I'm going to perhaps yield at this point and perhaps allow there are all Swansea councillors. I don't know who got their hand up first, actually. So
Jen. I'm sorry, I didn't see who got the hand up first, but I've just seen Jen, so I'll call you in first.
Peter Black, who put his hand up first.
Okay, yes, sorry, I can't see everybody. Peter then, Peter.
Okay, thanks. I've actually been round this building. I was going to suggest that we actually asked for a site visit. It might be useful for the archives committee to actually have a look around the building itself while this assessment work is being undertaken. I think there are issues about cost which are going to have to be resolved before the project can go ahead. But certainly I think it would be useful if the Archives Committee could themselves have a tour just to see for themselves what exactly is involved and ahead of any proper assessment.
Could we park that one, please?
Yes.
Perhaps take the other comments.
Okay. Jen?
Thank you. Yes, I have not been round British Home Stores store since it ceased to be British Home Stores. And what I remember, both in the basement and going up in the upper floors, it was not built to a particularly high standard at the time. It was what it was, a sort of quick bit of shopping facility. That being the case, I'm sure there's a lot of work going on into making it a central hub. But I am concerned at this two-track system, in that major designs are going forward, but the archive situation seems to have barely got off the blocks, which means we're going to have a fait accompli of you either check your standards and move into this space, that's a possible option, or you go elsewhere. And I, for one, think the accreditation process is extremely important, especially being able to access lottery heritage grants. I've spent sort of short breaks this summer going round, and the amount of heritage lottery breaks have been incredibly helpful for a number of cities and towns, and we would be cutting our throats if we lost that. Plus, we do have an absolute duty of care to look after the documents we have. Now, I don't know if anyone's done any work on what else is around, but I'm surprised in this case, having followed the upgrading of the Glenvivian Art Gallery, where security, conservation, and safe security of works of art were built into it from the word go, just why the archives seem to be parked to one side. So I really would like to find out how we get both schemes on the same track with the same timetable, because at the moment it's just not looking good. But I would like to go and have a look around it, or even been shown some plans.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you very much.
I can see Robert. Oh, Robert's. Yes, Robert, you got your hand up.
I think Lyndon was before me. If you want to take
Obviously,
him first.
okay. Sorry, with the with Teams, I can't see who goes
Yeah,
first. So yes, so Lyndon, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The point that Jen makes, the last time I actually went round the British Home Store site was when it was actually open, and an aunt actually worked there, but it wasn't, I can remember, to any great standard, being built to any great standard even at that time. The problem we're getting now is we're so far down the line. I think it's a great site for accessibility and for all the services that Swansea Council intend to put there. I think it's brilliant. But as we're quite a way down the line, all those will have been agreed, and the archive will be getting something in the corner. Really, as no assessments have yet been done, we need to find that out, and what would need to be done to make it safe for the archive to go there. And is that a possibility? But as I say, with everything else moving ahead at speed, to get the other services there, that is absolutely quite important. I think the accreditation is vital to get that funding. And the other, I think we've obviously talked about this since I became a member of the Archive Committee about 4 years ago. And if we don't go there, is there a plan B?
I'll listen and turn to the comments, and then we'll perhaps address some of the things. I think Councillor Smith.
Yeah, just to say, I'm a little bit unsure what's happening now, because when the design team responsible for this met Cabinet and an away day about a month ago, I specifically raised this. It's British Standard 16893, I think we're talking about, is it?
It is indeed, yes, yeah.
And I specifically mentioned that, and they gave. I understood that they were a lot further ahead than what it appears that they are. So I don't know what's, whether they're crossed wires here in terms of what they were saying there and the situation. Are you aware of any assessment of that building to date?
Yes, perhaps I need to go on. The hands are going up, and I thought I'll listen to everybody, but the problem will be that I'll forget to respond to the comments or ask the questions. I don't know whether.
Well, I've made a note of the comments as people are speaking, Kim. So perhaps if other people want to speak,
if Councillor Gibbard would like to say something, Councillor Black, you've already.
Yeah.
Because what I was going to suggest, because I think Jeff Bacon was leading that presentation to Cabinet. So whether it's worth Jeff Bacon being invited to this meeting or some kind of communication with him just to iron out where we are with it.
Well, I think I'd like to respond to some of these, and perhaps because I'm aware that councillors are saying things that I've probably got more information, so I can answer that. But Councillor Gibbard hasn't had the chance to speak. Councillor Black, if you're happy, can we defer you till after, and then I'll continue that, and everybody has one chance to speak. But,
yeah, I was just very much going to agree with Councillor Smith, really. And I thought my understanding was that these weren't being done separately. It was sort of moving ahead at the same time with the rest of the plan. So I agree that perhaps it would be good if we could go on site or have a presentation from the team to clarify that and to answer questions. Obviously, Kim, I'm not trying to suggest that you don't know the issues, but you know, perhaps if we had it straight from the horse's mouth, and it would save time and be easier for clarification.
Okay, well, I think I'll butt in there, and I hope I'll deal with all issues, but the chair will correct me if there are any issues that I haven't covered. So, sort of moving on. So REBA Stage 2, as I say, this REBA Stage 2 is, for some of you may be familiar with, but it essentially shows the different interplay of the spaces within the structure and how they all relate to each other. That's been published. And this is where I have my concerns, because the archive storage area is placed on the second floor of the building above the library. Now, I say I have concerns. Also, Welsh Government has concerns, and our external advisor from the National Conservation Service has very serious concerns about this. I should perhaps go over my concerns first, being a thing, but I am seriously concerned about the fire risk to the archive collections. It has been mentioned that the building is concrete and steel structure, but it was built immediately after the war. It's not like a concrete and steel structure that was perhaps built in the 1980s or later. And material was very short at the time. We know that steel was very short because we published the book, the Rebuilding of Swansea, and a large part of that book covers the issue of the shortage of steel. It hardly needs saying that archive collections are highly combustible in their nature. It mostly consists of paper. I have to say that libraries are also highly combustible because they mostly consist of paper. We have an archive storage area that's placed on top of the library, and we also have a building that we don't know what the strength is of the floors, but we know that it's not going to be that strong because the plans that I've seen indicate that the mobile shelving can't be used, so they have to use static shelving, presumably because it's too heavy. And also the partitioning for the archive area can't be a solid partition of concrete breeze block. So the solution that's proposed is stud work and plasterboard. I need hardly say that I've got very severe concerns that this provides the necessary fire protection, which should be 4-hour fire protection. Now you can mitigate against that by putting sprinklers throughout the rest of the building, but we have a building that we don't even have the full control of, because part of it has been, those of you who remember it from British Home Stores Day, remember that Miss Selfridge is on the corner there, and it's now the What Superstore, but we don't actually have full control over the whole building. So there are various scenarios that I go through in my own head, but a severe fire that affected that building, say a fire in the library, we don't know what the strength of the floor is. The archive collections could just collapse into the library. Similarly, if a fire took place, traditionally firefighters pour lots of water on the roof to help dampen down the fire. And of course, with the archives on the top floor, that would essentially mean that they would be drenched eventually once the roof stopped, gave way and started to let in water. So you've got the risk of fire damage and water damage. So for those reasons, all the archivists who've seen this plan have been very strongly opposed to. My personal feeling is that this solution cannot attain British Standard 16893. Simply, no, I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to understand that there are severe issues, serious issues relating to the proposed location of the archive store on the top floor of this building. Now, Chris Woods from the National Conservation Service has said, can't you locate it somewhere else, like on the ground floor? Because if we go back 3 months, Chris was saying you could do it. It's going to be expensive. It's probably going to be more expensive than a greenfield site or starting from scratch, but it could be done. And of course, it's a good location and so on. But it seems to me that the location of the archive store as currently planned is based on considerations of other uses for the building. You know, obviously ground floor is prime space for other services. Most people who go into a building don't really want to walk very far within the building. So, you know, ground floor is premium space for whoever else wants to use the building. So I am not personally convinced that this is the right solution for West Glamorgan Archives. I don't think it offers the safety and sustainability that you'd expect for the archive collections. Now, Chris has also raised, because Chris is very keen on this, the issues around thermal modelling, which and there has been a lot of work on the thermal modelling, but the essentially, if you're up in the roof space, it heats up during the day on a hot day, and then it cools down at night. And the heat from heating the rest of the building naturally percolates upwards as well. So you've got heat gain and heat loss from solar radiation, and then you've got the internal heat within the building. And the proposed solution is simply to work around that through air conditioning, basically. So you have to, your air conditioning is constantly fighting on a hot day, it's constantly fighting the fact that the roof is heating up through solar gain. And then the other thing, you know, at night when it's losing heat, it's you then have to keep heating it up. So what is proposed is in terms of energy use and sustainability going forward, because the whole thing about new archive buildings is that they're built with thermal inertia in mind. So typically, if you have a new build, you have a double-skinned building, so you have a lot of insulation. If you go to Glamorgan Archives in Cardiff, which is perhaps a more useful thing to actually go and visit another archive building, because there are some really fine examples locally in Cardiff and Carmarthenshire, which is just about to open, which I'm a great fan of as a very modest archive building done for £2.5 million or thereabouts. It's done very modestly by Carmarthenshire County Council. Of course, they had same problems with their facility, or similar problems, but it's been done with passive house in mind, so it's about minimal thermal gain and thermal loss, and those are the kind of things moving forward with new archive buildings. And I think it's also the way for new buildings to go forward as well. I mean, obviously Swansea Council has invested in passive house for its new council houses, as I'm sure you're familiar with, but this seems to be a very 1970s, 1980s solution to the archive storage problem, coupled with the fact that it's a relatively old building and it has these issues. I think, I cannot put my hand on our hearts and say that I think this is a safe place for the archive collections to go. I'm sorry to say this. I'm saying this on probably putting my head on the chopping block in doing this, but I'm just not happy personally with the proposed solution, and I'm sure that those of you can have as much imagination as I have, can see the obvious risks that are involved in terms of what could happen. Obviously we hope it would never happen, but there are severe risks relating to that building. Sorry, a lot of hands there, so I'll stop for a minute. I think Councillor Black probably he put his hand up earlier, so.
Sorry, you want to bring me
Sorry,
in?
sorry.
Yeah. I find that explanation very helpful indeed, actually, and I think it underlines why I think it'd be useful for the Archives Committee to actually ask to meet the designers and architects on site and have a look for themselves, because it does seem to me that it would be quite helpful for us as a committee to insert ourselves into this process in that way. I mean, as Robert said earlier on, I understand a lot of work has been done, but clearly the explanation which Kim's just given now makes it, I think, helps a great deal in understanding the risks involved to the archive of that. And I do think it would be useful if we were able to insert ourselves in the process in that way by asking specifically to meet the designers and architects and maybe the cabinet member as well on site, so that we could put those points to them and see what they have to say and stress the concern we have for the future of the archive.
Thank you, Peter. Robert, were you next or Jen?
I think Jen was before
Jen,
me.
thank you.
Thank you. I would agree with Peter's suggestions. I'm not sure whether it would have to be on site. But clearly the points that have been raised, and Swansea has signed up to a climate charter, so we really need to consider, do we want to have air conditioning full blast all the time? I don't think so. But there seems to be a little bit of a mismatch, and if we are going to go into this building, it's really important that the two streams are tied together a little more closely. So I really think it's important that the Archive Committee meets with the designers and actually finds out what's known, what's unknown. We've heard reference to the first floor. Now I remember British Home Stores had a basement as well, electrical goods, I think. What's there? I think the whole thing is a little bit of a puzzle at the moment, and I would honestly like to know more about it, again, because I think if Swansea is going to keep storage as part of the whole West Glamorgan accreditation scheme, we all need to be a little bit more confident that this is the right location.
Thank you, Jen. Just a comment about a site visit. I think it's an excellent idea, and perhaps for our Neath Port Talbot members of the committee who may not be familiar with the building, perhaps a site visit might help them to understand, the whole area and the site that we're talking about. Notwithstanding that a presentation as well would be equally valuable. Robert.
Yeah, I think listening to what Kim was saying there, I think things have moved on since that cabinet was given, since that presentation given to the cabinet away day, to be honest. And I mean, at the moment, it sounds as if Louise and myself, just because we happen to be members of this committee and happen to be on cabinet, acting as conduits here. Well, I think that there needs to be something a bit more formal than us happening to be on the committee, to be honest. And there needs to be a meeting with the people, with the project manager on behalf of the council and the committee, and I think that's something we can ask for. So there's we're all aware of where things are and people are aware of the issues.
Thank you.
Could I respond to? Well, I've forgotten which councillor suggested, but personally, I don't think a site visit is necessary or useful. I do think perhaps a consultation with the MDT might be a thing, but I think in terms of understanding the site, I've not been around the site myself, but I think I think that if it's quite feasible to to visualize the site from other sources. And I think that you can often get waylaid by isn't this space wonderful, because I think that's also part of the the site visit, that you can see. I think what this boils down to is simply, will it meet the British standard? Will it meet the as Councillor Rayner has suggested, the requirements for the climate charter and sustainability? So is it a safe and sustainable future for the archive collections that will meet the British standard, maintain accreditation for the service, and going forward, this should be a solution that lasts for decades. It shouldn't be a solution that after 5 or so years we're saying, well, that didn't really work very well, and we need to come, and then people turn around and say, well, there isn't any money. Because it should be said that Welsh Government is funding the city centre hub. The funding from Welsh Government is currently frozen on the basis that proper assurances have to be received from Swansea Council that the solution for the archives is meets the British standard. So what Welsh Government has said, that if basically if this city centre hub involves a solution for the archives which doesn't go up to standard, then Welsh Government does not want to be associated with the whole project. And obviously there's a lot of funding at stake there in terms of third parties as well. So it's I'm really pleased that they put that hold on it, because in a way it's like a restraining hand to make sure that Swansea Council does the right thing in terms of its archives. I stress that I have had a lot of support from fellow archivists, so the specialists in Welsh Government are archivists. Obviously, the people at the National Archives are archivists, but also the head of service as well, saying if it's not right for the archives, as you know, Councillor Rayner, she was very involved with the Glamorgan Art Gallery, so is well aware that heritage collections require specific standards to be required. I'm not sure whether that's percolated right the way through the council, but certainly I've had a lot of support from my head of service in this.
Thanks, Kim. Jen, and then Peter.
Thanks. As has been, I really hope we can go into a city centre location, but as has been raised, I think, by Lyndon, a plan B somewhere is very useful. So I would appreciate it, Kim, if you could share the information on the new Carmarthenshire facility with us, because I know they had to deal with what they thought was a cheap and cheerful solution, which sadly backfired, and move forward. So if we have any more information on the Carmarthenshire facility, I would be happy to have a look at it, and I think everybody would. And I know in Neath there's always been this ongoing problem with the Institute. How can that be brought up to improve standards? So I think we need to have a number of things on the table, but clearly the front runner should be the city centre location. At the end of the day, it's security of what an archive service should provide for West Glamorgan.
Thank you, Jen. Peter?
Yeah, thank you, Jen. My preference is for a new build. It always has been. I think that's still the best solution, and preferably accessible into the city centre. But I do feel that it would be useful to go and have this meeting on site, not because you think you'll see good space, because actually I tell you now you won't, but also because it also helps us to understand if you come back and say, okay, the second floor is not suitable, let's put it in the basement. It helps you understand what sort of space is available there, and I don't think the basement is actually big enough. So I think it's really important that we have a look at it on site if that's possible. I think definitely need to have a meeting with the architects, definitely need to have that discussion with the designers and the problems around it. But if we can have it on site, I think it would be very useful just to help us understand exactly what's there and what's been proposed, and also enable us to respond if they come back with alternatives to the second floor.
I think I could quickly respond. One thing I don't really want to do is you can't build by committee, basically. So, I think the architect has to work on it. I'm wary of going around the building and saying, well, you could put it there and so on, because
Well, I mean, I don't think we're proposing that, Kim. What we're saying is that we just need to understand what they're coming forward with, and we need to understand ourselves what the space involves and what the problems are. They need to make their case, don't they? And the case needs to meet the criteria and the British standard. If it doesn't meet the British standard, we shouldn't be supporting it. So, I've been round it, and I wasn't convinced at all, to be honest. I'm not convinced about the costings either. I mean, they still haven't taken the asbestos into account on that building as part of the work. So, I do think it'd be useful to have a look. I'm just having been round it myself.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. Any other comments, observations? Yeah. Well, thank you. I think the committee is completely at one that there is considerable disquiet over the plans for the new location, in particular it being sited on the second floor. I think those 3 pillars, Kim, which you have mentioned about fire and flooding and environmental protection and security are really well highlighted, and from everybody's comments, we really do need further information and would like to have a more detailed update from the multidisciplinary team. So that would be extremely welcomed, Kim. So, the 2 actions that are proposed is that consultation meeting with MDT and information on the Carmarthen facility, which would help to inform members' thinking as well. So, if we can record that.
Perhaps if I bring a separate report back to the next committee on some of the archive developments in across Wales, I think it might be.
Yes.
I mean, thinking potentially the committee. Well, obviously, it does depend on the way this develops, of course. So, a visit to Carmarthen show may be appropriate, but it may be that we're moving forward faster than we.
Yes. Yeah.
It might be something else.
Yes. Kim, in terms of timing, the REBA has taken place, but my recollection is that REBA Stage 3 is probably due to start very soon, end of this month or October, which is a more critical stage when plans are being firmed up. So it's important maybe to have this meeting, this consultation with the MDT before that stage.
Yes, it is moving very quickly, and REBA Stage 3 does actually set things more in stone, and that's a concern actually. That REBA Stage 2. I don't even know whether at REBA Stage 2 you can actually shift the bits round in the box. I'm not too familiar with the REBA stages, but obviously, I think to me the question is either would an alternative location work, but I think you still go back to it has to meet British standards because it has to meet accreditation and the TNA, the National Archives recognition as a place of deposit for local place of deposit for records.
Thanks, Kim. Lyndon, you've got your hand up. Do you want to?
Chair, I was only going to make the point it would be useful to have the meeting sooner rather than wait to our next normal meeting because we need to make probably quick decisions. So I was just going to make a suggestion that we do that.
Yes, and that's of course with what we've just been saying about the REBA Stage 3, because that's the next level up really. So yeah, we're at a critical point I think in the project, which the committee would wish to have some kind of input into before it goes any further. So Kim, would you be able to set that up?
Yes, I think the committee Gareth would be able to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chair, just come in to double check. I think members agreed they need a briefing or a presentation with the relevant officers and designers at the earliest opportunity. It probably wouldn't be a formal committee because of the, details and that. So maybe a sort of informal briefing, which obviously would be done via Teams probably.
Yeah.
The only other thing was, I think members unanimously support that. The other question would be whether we want to go on site or not, or whether you could have the briefing and then decide that there potentially. So just to formalise it, because it has been suggested, but not supported, or we haven't had a vote.
Would the right stage be if we had this presentation first, because we don't know what's going to arise from the presentation? There may be other issues that we would want further information, and we can include a discussion on whether a site visit would be appropriate to augment what is being presented to the committee when we meet with the MDT. Would that be acceptable?
Word the minute accordingly that we have the presentation, and if needed, following that, members undertake a site visit. And if it's not needed, then you don't need to go on site. As Kim indicated.
But absolutely, take your point, Peter. It's a very valid and important point that seeing what's there, notwithstanding that people could get swayed by just looking at it. It may not be suitable in any case. So that would be a very useful for members, but we'll take it or make that decision after we've had the presentation.
Just to stress the timeline, because the REBA Stage 3 is set for the end of October, so we're talking about 6 weeks or something like that. Now, the council wants a decision to be made on whether the archives is in or out of the project by that time, because as just said, REBA Stage 3 sets things much more firmly in stone. So, the timeline is very, very quick because it's moving on the project. I mean, I think the essentially the paperwork for whether it meets the British standard, all these sets of risk assessments will have to be submitted very quickly to the powers that be, that is Welsh Government and the National Archives. And I hope at that point we would reach a decision as to whether the British standard is met. As I've no doubt don't need to repeat, but from the present location, I have very severe doubts whether British standard 16893 can be met for an archive storage area that's situated on top of a library on the second floor of the building in the not roof space, but the top floor.
Yeah. Okay. Well, quite clearly, the committee would want to be satisfied and would want to be satisfied that the risk assessments are as thorough as they need to be in order to satisfy those standards. And of course, the accreditation status is also critical as well. So we have that to think, and it's
indeed, and that's running alongside the time frame for. So the end of October is both the REBA Stage 3 and the accreditation review. So
but there are huge implications all round if the decision isn't the right one. So the committee, as I say, is at one in wanting to ensure that the right decision is made because of the ramifications across all aspects of the archive service. So Kim, thank you very much for your very comprehensive and very detailed explanation and the information that you've given the committee. And I'm sure we've all found it extremely helpful and useful. So thank you. Do you want to quickly?
I think I'll wrap up there. Actually, yes. I'll take any questions on any other part of the report, but I'm aware there isn't a rule set in stone that we have to last an hour. But I know I'm well aware that we've run over the the time. Would any member like to ask any questions on any other aspect of the report? Obviously, it was a pretty huge paragraph for discussion there.
Any other questions? No, and yes, no, there isn't any rule that it has to last for an hour. I know people do, but I'm always of the view that when you have something important like this to discuss, really, it needs to take the time that it does. And we're only 10 minutes past 12, and we've covered everything else satisfactorily, and we've had a really good debate and discussion about the most important aspect on the agenda, that of the relocation of the archives. So thank you all very much indeed for your contributions, and we'll wait to hear from Gareth as to when the meeting with the MDT can take place. So thank you all. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Bye-bye.